name's David Church. I'm the General Counsel to the Utah League of Cities and Towns. When I do a presentation, I don't use a PowerPoint, so you won't be distracted by me not being able to manipulate the machinery. And you can feel free to raise your hand at any time and ask any question that you think is appropriate to the subject at hand, and I'll answer it. It's not going to throw it off. You don't have to wait to the end. The more questions, the better. I know lots of you have questions, and I would really appreciate it if you do have them, that you ask them. Every time after I finish one of these, 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 people come up to me and then say, well, I wanted to ask this, but I didn't want to ask it in front of everybody else. That takes all the fun out of it. Okay, first let's talk just generally about the Open and Public Meetings Act. We all know what it is now. At least we should, but maybe there's one person here that's new, that just got appointed last week, that just got elected. We'll start from scratch for them. The Open and Public Meetings Act is a state law that is written by and passed by the state legislature that is intended to apply to all public bodies in the state. It applies, there isn't a separate Open and Public Meetings Act for towns or counties. There isn't a separate Open and Public Meetings Act for the legislature. It's the same act for everybody. And the act, interestingly enough, has a policy statement that is very clear and straightforward. That policy statement says this. It says that it is the intent of the legislature that the state and its political subdivisions exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business, and that they are to take their actions openly and their deliberations are to be conducted openly. Very straightforward, very clear. It's the intent of the legislature that we deliberate openly and we take our actions openly. Let me just say, this is so important to the legislature that they put it right at the start of the act. They even put in the act that there's the potential for criminal penalties if we violate the act. It's so important to the legislature that they don't bother to apply it to themselves. In 2015, I was looking at a newspaper articles yesterday about the legislative session, and then got passed in the back of the legislative session. And you remember in 2015 when the big issue in the state was Medicaid expansion, you know, the Obamacare, and the legislature's considering it. There's a quote in the newspaper on the health care debate of 2015 from our Speaker Hughes. He said, he's quoted as saying, the Draper Republican, meaning the Speaker, said a private discussion was merited given the plan's potentially wide-ranging effect for years to come. We can't do this in a fish tank, Hughes said, highlighting concerns that public scrutiny might hamper an honest and open debate. In 2017, when they're talking about tax reform, the newspaper article says, tax reform, the most debated issue at the 2017 legislature, never even had a public hearing after closed-door negotiations among Republicans failed to produce an agreement on a plan that included restoring the sales tax on food. Their work was largely carried out behind the scenes and debated in closed-door House and Senate Republican caucus meetings. Democrats were briefed on the proposal but did not participate in the discussions. That's the unfairness of the world in which we live. We're subject to the Open and Public Meetings Act, and we're required to deliberate and debate openly. We're not given the same opportunities that the legislature has given themselves, that when we have tough issues or difficult discussions, to deliberate and debate in closed session. We don't get to take closed straw polls on the tough issues and decide whether or not we're going to bring it forward for a final vote. We don't get to hold a closed discussion and avoid, as Speaker Hughes says, the fish tank. They can't do it in a fish tank. We're expected to. So let me tell you why and how it works and how it applies. First, The policy and purpose is that our decisions and our deliberations have to be taken openly. It applies to every public body, and it applies to every meeting of a public body. The first thing you need to understand is, what is a public body? Public body is defined in the Act to be any body that's been officially created by some official action like an ordinance, a constitution, the legislature, that consists of 2 or more persons, that has the power, that's supported by public funds, and has been given even a little bit of power, that has the power to make a public decision or give advice on a public decision. So clearly all of our city and town councils are public bodies. They're created by statute. They have more than 2 people, 2 or more people. Clearly all of our planning commissions are public bodies. They're created by your local ordinance. They consist of 2 or more persons. Although, interestingly, in theory, you could have a planning commission of 1 person. The statute says on planning commissions, this drives the planners nuts, by the way, when I suggest this. It's my goal in life before I quit to create one of these. The statute says we can designate the number of our planning commissioners by ordinance. I just want somebody sometime to say, our planning commission consists of 1 member. That way we'd never have to hold a public meeting and we'd get our decisions done quicker. But no one's taken me up on that yet. But clearly those are public bodies. If you create a committee officially, a commission, an advisory panel, and you officially create it by resolution or ordinance, and you support it with public funds, and you give them some level of authority, it is a public body and will be subject to the Open and Public Meetings Act. So those of you who have standing historic committees, if you have a cemetery advisory committee, if you have the golf course advisory committee, the town days committee, and it's official, it was created by some ordinance or resolution, and you give them some power to make a decision and you support them with public money, they have to comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act. Now, the reason why the legislature gets to deliberate and decide the way they do is they have defined in the Act that public body does not include a political caucus. So at the legislative level, they've just said, everybody's a public body except when we meet as a political caucus, and then we're not a public body and we can do it in private if we want. There's no opportunity for those of you in this room to do it that way. I don't think there's a city in the state anymore that runs a partisan political election, although still in state law, unless they've taken it out this year, was the option for cities of less than the second class to run partisan elections. But the last city I knew that did that was Ephraim, and I think they gave that up long ago. But you don't have political caucuses. You can't just divide and say, we're going into caucus, we're going into the political party caucus, we're going to decide what we're going to do, then come out. Nor do I think you should. I think it's good public policy to deliberate and debate in public. I think the public ought to know, for example, on the 2017 tax reform, which legislators were in favor of taking the sales tax off food, which legislators were in favor of putting the sales tax back on food. They didn't think that was important for us to know. They wanted to know, do we have a majority? If we have a majority, we'll bring it out and vote on it. If we can't decide amongst ourselves, we won't bring it out and vote. Okay, we know what a public body then is. The next question is, yes, his question is, we have a closed session when we're considering certain contracts, how does that fit? I'll talk about that in a minute, but let me just say there is the possibility of closed sessions. I'm worried when you say certain contracts. It depends on the subject matter of it, but if I don't cover it, remind me when we get there. The next question we always need to answer once we know what a public body is the definition of meeting. This is where people get into trouble and where there can be some conflict and controversy. How do we know when we're meeting? Meeting is defined as the convening of the public body. Somebody has called it together by somebody who has the authority to convene it for the purposes for which the public body has been created and in which a quorum is present. There is not a meeting unless you're convened for your purpose and a quorum is present. Now, all the time I get the question, well, was it a meeting of Ephraim City Council or whatever city council or the North Salt Lake City Council when we came to the League of Cities and Towns Convention? I see a quorum of the North Salt Lake City Council present here. Is it their meeting? My answer to that is no. They weren't convened as the North Salt Lake City Council. It's the meeting of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. There may be 3 members of the North Salt Lake City Council here present. It may be a quorum of the North Salt Lake City Council, but they weren't convened to meet here as the North Salt Lake City Council. It's somebody else's meeting. So if you're convened, if there's a quorum, it could be a meeting. What is a quorum? A quorum is defined in the state statute as a majority of the governing body unless there's a statute or rule that defines it otherwise. Your quorum for your city and town councils is defined by state law. Your quorum, if you're in a city that has under the 6-member form of government, mayor and 5 council members, your quorum is 3 council members. Your mayor and 2 is not a quorum. 3 council members without the mayor is a quorum. If you're in a town that has or Harriman City that has the 5-member council form of government, you've got a mayor and 4 council members, your quorum is any of those 3. The mayor and 2 is a quorum. 3 council members without the mayor is a quorum. Any 3 in the 5-member council form is a quorum. Some of the larger cities have the 7-member council form of government. The quorum in that is 4. If you've got 4, you're in a quorum, you could be in a meeting. Any questions about what a meeting is and quorum for you? For your planning commissions, your quorum is going to be established either by your ordinance that creates it or your rules of procedure, or if there is none, it's a majority of your planning commission. Yes, sir. His question was on a board, does the chair count towards the quorum and can he vote? If the board has been created by some ordinance or statute and it defines quorum, then you would look to that definition. If there is no definition, then it is a majority of the members of the public body, which would include counting the chairman. Whether the chairman can vote or not vote depends on your rules of procedure for your particular board that have either set by statute or adopted. So the simple example is, of course, in a city with a 6-member form of government, the mayor votes only in cases of a tie and on issues of whether or not to take away the mayor's power or give it back to him and on hiring and firing the city manager. In a 5-member council form of government, the mayor votes on every issue. In the mayor-council form of government, the strong form that Salt Lake has, the mayor doesn't sit as a member of the council. The mayor doesn't have a vote on the council. The mayor has a veto. So it depends. The mayor's role, the mayor's vote depends on how you're set up, but the mayor's participation, or the chair is definitely a member of the public body, and without an other statute saying so, would count towards the quorum because a majority of the board is the quorum by default. Any other questions on quorum? Yes. Her question is 3 city council members at a non-city function social gathering and they begin to speak about a city topic. Excellent question. One of the exceptions to the meeting definition is chance get-togethers or purely social occasions. Those are defined out of being a meeting. So a purely social occasion where you're all there, you know, and which city are you from? Millville. They're all in the same Relief Society presidency. You can't get a man to run for office in Millville anymore. She's been very kind about that. And it's, you know, there's only one ward interested in local government. it is not a meeting if you just get together for some other purpose or some social occasion or something like that. But if you then take the opportunity to start talking about city business, you're on the slippery slope. You're on dangerous ground, because the purpose and the intent of the legislation is that we take our decisions openly and we deliberate openly. If you find yourself deliberating, you're close to cheating. You're caucusing, like the Republicans do to make tough decisions. You're just caucusing in a better location when you do it at the Christmas dinner. Any other question? Yes. Okay, email. Can you convene via email? Electronic meetings are possible under the Act. So it is, in theory, possible to be convened in a meeting even if none of you are in the same room. It is also possible to deliberate and decide via email. So it is possible to cheat via email. But I cannot say that you emailing all members of the council with your position violates the Open and Public Meetings Act, because it doesn't. The statute specifically defines electronic communication, and then and it includes in that email, texting, as electronic communication. And the statute says that nothing in the Open and Public Meetings Act shall be construed in any way to say that electronic communication between the board members is a violation of the Act. So, back in the old days, before they amended the statute that way, before Facebook was created, before texting was so popular, it was easy for me to say, look, if you all get on the telephone in a conference call, you have convened and you are deliberating and you're cheating. It was also easy for me to say, but if you call John and say, this is how I feel, what do you feel? You're not cheating. There is no quorum. It's two of you discussing. You're politicking. You're deciding. And, you know, I shut that off and it came on automatically. And then if John calls Ned and says, I just had a discussion, and there's only two on, I can't say that you're convened. I can't say you're cheating. That was easy. You could draw clear lines. But if you all got on the conference call, you were clearly cheating. And then email came along, became popular, and people would say, what about if I email everybody? Well, I can't say that's cheating. What about if we're all sitting at our computer and we're emailing in immediately, right back and forth, and everybody's getting it, or we're texting right now? I used to train that appears to me to be absolutely a meeting and that you're deliberating and deciding. But the statute says that electronic communication is not necessarily a violation of the Act. I will tell you that you are cheating if you're all on some text messaging board at the same time or email at the same time or are having a back and forth discussion in real time about the issue and how you're going to vote and there's a quorum present. I will also tell you that I don't think it's cheating if you get on Facebook, for example, on those forums. How much more transparent and public is that? You know, everybody in town could be on it with you. So you will know when you draw the line. You will know if you're cheating. But it is not a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act for you to email everybody on the town council or the city council and say, we're crazy if we do this. Or it's not a violation if you send everybody a text message during the middle of the week that says, I'm voting no and you're not going to change my mind. And they text you back and say, what could we do to change your mind? And that's not cheating. But it's getting close. Did that answer your question? Yes. It seems like it's cheating to me too, but I don't think it's technically a violation of the Act anymore. And by the way, you're going to get caught of it. I've been training on this and teaching on this kind of stuff for so many years. I tell the same stories. I've got no new ones. I can barely remember anything anymore. I'm aging faster than anybody else in the room. Some of you have been here a long time, by the way. But and so I decided this morning when I came up that I'm not going to feel bad about retelling the same stories and using the same examples, because maybe everybody else has forgotten I've told them. But back in the when I first became a city attorney, one of my first clients that I went to all the city meetings with was Riverton City. A very nice city, lovely place to represent, very rural and small town at the time. Back in 1980 or that. I don't see anybody from Riverton here, are they? But they had a restaurant in town called La Fonda's there. And before every city council meeting, the council met and had, something at La Fonda's. And when you came to the meeting, it was clear how efficient that worked. You didn't waste time on long discussions. You knew what was going to happen. It was also very clear to the members of the public present. Some tough issues, somebody raises their hand, I move we do it for the reasons previously discussed, and they say, okay, all aye. And somebody says, when previously discussed? And then somebody say, oh yeah, at dinner, Now, that's changed over the years. We don't do that as much anymore. It's clear now that no matter what we call it, a work meeting, another meeting, they're all public meetings, no matter what you call them. The same rules apply to every meeting. The location doesn't matter. It's a meeting. It's subject to the Open and Public Meetings Act. And I know it's difficult for people to avoid that, but remember, we voluntarily got into this. You voluntarily ran for election. It's like going to the beach and refusing to wear the swimming suit.